Hey up, another video. We're doing History Wednesday today for the daily reacts. Extreme historical hobbies that sound made up. Blood on Richard Nixon.
When you're bored, you have the luxury of playing video games, downloading a book, or pulling up a YouTube video about how strange history can be. You should probably do more of that last one. But back in the day, you had to get creative when looking for ways to pass time. And I mean, alarmingly creative. Today, we're going to tell.
Imagine how bored it would be to not actually have a computer at home. You sit down after a long day of work and go, oh, I'm just going to look at this file for 7 hours and then go to bed.
Tell you about some extreme
boring
hobbies from the past that made
up. But sorry for pausing this video real quick. People in 100 years time will look back and wow, not a sentence. People in 100 years time will look back now and go, oh my god, there's not the how do they not have that back 100 years time? What do they even do? You know, AI and VR, let's be realistic, AI and VR would be so far advanced in 100 years time. JD Vance. They'll be advanced so far that like people like look, oh, they just looked at a screen. Like people playing VR now, it's just ass, it's shite. And AI is pretty good at the moment, but you can't do anything. You know, you just want to have glasses on and be able to do it. But in 100 years time, they're going to look back and go, wow, that receding the hairline, bold man, I hope he got that sorted. All it is now, you just need a spray, but I have to go to Turkey.
Totally aren't. But before we get started, why not subscribe to the Weird You? Because it's time for some weird history.
We're gonna get wacky!
Humanity's obsession with the macabre did not begin with 80s slasher films or classic Hollywood monster pictures. It turns out people have always enjoyed gruesome get-togethers, and few are more ghoulish than...
Who sits like that? Watching a movie, how uncomfortable would that be, the guy and the girl on the armrest?
mummy unwrapping parties. While the word mummy is classically associated with ancient Egypt, we're actually looking quite a bit further ahead on the calendar to 19th century Victorian England, where the richest, most influential weirdos would buy up all the mummies they could get their hands on. Important members of high society would be invited to view these cadavers, ironically, in the middle of the living room, being unwrapped and often degraded in front of a light audience, like a burlesque show for dusty skeletons. You had to possess a bit of showmanship to host one of these eloquently eerie soirees.
You all right, Dave? You want to come around and unwrap this mummy, mate? Yeah, sure, why not?
Like famous surgeon Thomas Pettigrew, who was renowned for being one of the best mummy undressers in the business. That is, before criticism caused the parties to fall out of fashion. Normally, the morgue is reserved for people with temperatures well below 98.6 degrees.
It's probably a funny joke that if I know what I meant.
Hey kid, you want to see a dead body? Into a booming business model. In 1886, a newspaper article reported on a 4-year-old girl who died from only a bruise on her hand. Morbidly curious members of the public flocked to the morgue to get a look at the poor deceased soul on display. That frenzy is believed to have shifted the morgue business from a way to identify the remains of loved ones into an exciting pastime for French citizens and British visitors alike. By the end of the 19th century, the morgue was considered a must-see destination in France. Bodies were displayed in morgue windows for all to see, sometimes for several days at a time. Obviously, this practice has since fallen out of fashion, but it paved the way for modern-day mannequins. Just kidding.
Oh, it's terrible. I had to do it because it was France. That's what I think of it. Fucking old man. I'm terrible.
You and the rest of your 5th grade history class go to watch a bunch of part-time actors pretend to shoot each other in period-accurate clothing. But
we were meant to act? I was a Confederate, so I was doing it for real.
Back during the Battle of Bull Run,
acting.
The Battle of the American Civil War, many were able to witness the real thing while enjoying a light snack. Many people went out and set up picnics near the battlefield to witness the combat firsthand, convinced that the Union forces would rapidly claim victory. Nobody quite knows why anyone thought it would be a good idea to enjoy a basket of finger food while their friends and neighbors shot cannons at each other. But
I mean, that'd be insanely cool to witness to go back in time, but actually doing that and seeing the Union get absolutely whipped by someone, you think, oh, good heavens, we've got to leave.
But suffice it to say, their decision to treat the conflict like a croquet match was swiftly regretted once the actual fighting got underway. Reports of spectators rushing to escape have been described as utter chaos. Roads were clogged with broken-down carriages trying to get away from the action, in what became known as the Great Skedaddle.
Such a white word.
For the NFL, the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady's televised divorce, there was mob football. Most of modern football was derived from this early version of the sport, originally created in the 12th century. Much like today, the game was played with a pigskin ball, which would be fought over by two opposing teams trying to score a goal.
In England.
In today's game, however, you had to score 3 times before receiving 1 point. Geez, their injury reports must have been a horror show. Other than that, there was pretty much only one rule: no murdering. It was a brutal game, less a sport than a segment on Jackass. But its popularity can't be denied, as it stands the test of time over 900 years later. Yep, that's right. The original version of Mob Ball is still played in the UK, with 2-day-long
It happened earlier this year.
matches held every year on Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday for thousands of fans. Around the 17th century, the hottest accessory wasn't jewelry or fancy clothes. It was a literal flaming barrel of tar you would carry down the street. Wonder if you can wear one on a chain, like Flava Flav. The bizarre tradition dates back centuries in England's Ottery St. Mary.
What's up?
The custom of carrying flaming barrels of tar down the road has been time-honored since 1605, just after Guy Fawkes' infamous gunpowder plot. The tar barrels are meant to symbolize the 36 barrels of gunpowder used by Fawkes in his attempt to blast Parliament sky high, like a gender reveal party. Originally, the barrels were rolled down the street. Today, the barrels are carried down the streets on the backs of giddy participants. The first Cotswold Olympic shin-kicking event was held in 1612 near Chipping Campden.
Why is it all England?
For many in the English countryside, the hobby is still going strong over 400 years later. The game is an offshoot of what is called Cotswold wrestling, with the aim being to trip an opponent by hooking their legs. It has since evolved to include players kicking shins, hitting, and tussling until the opponent is down on the ground. Basically, it's the pastime of little brother.
They're doing something wrong. They should have really transformed that into Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something like that, or Sambo, and made it a big thing for English fighters to have Cotswold wrestling to challenge the Dagestanis like the Georgians do.
And retired shuffleboard players drunk on Irish
Oh,
coffee.
fuck.
Famed lawyer Robert
And the Australian.
Dover is believed to be
JDM.
the father of Olympic shin kicking. The event went on for nearly 200 years straight before being suspended in 1642 during the English Civil War. But shin kicking was
Can you imagine that if you're in the Civil War and then the guy that does the shin kicking just comes up to you and boots you right in the bloody shin? Instead of stabbing you or shooting you with some horrific musket, he just whacks you in the shin with his shin.
revised in 1965 and has gained amazing traction
You're telling me after the Civil War, they didn't just keep it going? Why did they leave that dead?
ever since, with thousands of participants joining in year after year. Back in 1951, the detonation of an atomic warhead above
Fuck
the
me.
deserts gave birth to a fad known as atomic tourism. Like today, Las Vegas was no stranger to capitalizing on profit when opportunity arose. So the powers that be wasted no time on branding Vegas as the country's atomic tourist capital. Throughout the Strip in the 1950s, you could find
Well, that was also appealing, but
as the country's atomic tourist capital. Throughout the
that's just so appealing. It looks like such a simpler time. Look how cool that is.
Strip in the 1950s, you could find showgirls wearing mushroom cloud-inspired clothing, atomic cocktails being served at the bars, and even areas where one could go watch a live detonation for themselves from a relatively safe distance. Sort of like a Disney character breakfast with the most terrifying weapon ever constructed. Fans swept up in the hype would frequent Vegas in the 50s to view the atomic clouds, buy collectible postcards or calendars, and breathe in a crisp lungful of fallout. Eventually, the limited test ban was put into place in 1963, which prohibited above-ground nuclear testing. The fad may have been brief, but the memories and radiation poisoning
That's over 10 years, not that brief.
will last a lifetime.
You're pregnant.
What you doing?
During the Industrial Revolution, the emerging middle class in Victorian England found themselves with expendable income.
God, we must have been so bored.
And nary a Beanie Baby or Funko Pop figure in sight to spend it on. In their absence, Staffordshire Factory's colorful figurines became the must-have collectibles of the day, featuring likenesses of mermaids, pirates, and even a depiction of a jealous wife. These porcelain
Oh, that looks so shit.
statuettes were highly sought after by collectors. But by far, the hottest statues to put on your shelf were those of infamous murderers.
That's pretty cool.
Slashers at the time were forever immortalized as 6-inch ceramic figurines, sort of like an edgelord Precious Moments collection. And because Victorian England already had quite an obsession with the macabre, the statues sold like hotcakes. You could collect them all, including grisly figures like the deranged farmhand James Bloomfield Rush, or William Corder, who perpetrated the Red Barn murder. People still buy up Staffordshire ceramics to this very day.
Ew.
Another way Victorian England indulged its obsession with the macabre was the headless photograph fad, which
England
is exactly
again.
what it sounds like. Likely concocted by pioneering photographer Oscar Gustavo Raylander in 1856, headless photography was one of the early forms of photographic manipulation. The method involved working with the original negatives as well as cutting and pasting. With actual scissors and paste, not just hitting Control-C. The main challenge was to make the separate images appear as though one photo was taken. The other challenges involved explaining why you had a photo of a headless person.
How did he get the face behind the finger?
Experimental photographers were able to use various methods to create legitimate-looking decapitations, all in the name of morbid fun. Novelty photographs such as these were commissioned during the 19th century and required superior photography skills in order to pull off. These were the pioneer days before Adobe Photoshop, when skilled artists would have to complete their work in actual Photoshops. The ancient Egyptians held many animals in high regard, but none more so than those in the cat family. Egyptian royalty had large cats, such as lions and cheetahs, which they used in their hunting parties or simply kept as exotic pets. There wasn't a Department of Fish and Wildlife back then. Anyone was able to keep a menagerie of exotic pets like a Miami Coke Baron. The favorite was the cheetah, which held a special reverence to Egypt's people. You could find cheetahs in many influential households throughout the region. It was a popular pastime to house-train cheetahs, since they could be used to hunt mice and snakes, as well as big game. You know, big game, like that neighbor who likes to work on his Trans Am at 3 in the morning. Cheetahs were so revered that you could often find them buried alongside their owner, which really isn't too different from modern cat owners, is it? Sir James Carey may have proven that making goofy faces can be a lucrative career. But did you know it's also a competitive sport? Originating in 1267 at the Egremont Crab Fair in the UK, gurning, or contorting one's face, was created to celebrate the beginning of the crab apple harvest season. Participants would push their faces through a horse collar while trying to gurn the best face, or the worst face. We're still a bit iffy on the wording. They called it gurning through a braffin. Sounds like a Sting lyric. The contests are still held today in the UK during mid-September, when the world's best gurners travel to the small town to see who can turn the best gurn.
Right.
The sport gets boring. Drop it in the water. As the old saying goes, that was the hope the creators of water jousting had when they took traditional jousting and moved the whole operation to the river. It is believed that water jousting dates as far back as ancient Egypt and was popularized in France around 570 BC as a source of entertainment for French royalty. The idea is similar to normal jousting, except it is played while standing in a boat on a river instead of riding a horse. Oarsmen would row toward the opponent while the jouster tried to knock them into the water. An oarsman? No motorboats or airboats. Are we sure it's not supposed to be less boring? Predominant matches were held along the Saône River in Lyon, where it is rumored that Queen Elizabeth I even watched one of the tournaments.
How the fuck can it be rumored? How is that not like? That's surely that's easy to find out.
Practiced today in France and remains quite popular. You can visit the country in August during the Saint Louis Festival to watch teams joust each other to the soundtrack of medieval songs, just as their ancestors intended. So what do you think? Which crazy old hobby would you like to try? Let us
None. In fact, the Romans also had really extreme and curious hobbies. A clear example would be the Lupercalia, a party in moderation of the pranks that Romulus and Remus committed as children and dressed as wolves, in which naked men covered in goat and sheep blood ran through the city while hitting women with leather straps as a way of wishing them good fertility. In fact, many important figures of the time, such as Mark Antony, participated in a lot of the Lupercalis. Interestingly, the birth rate in the city considerably increased 9 months after each. My favourite uncle was a Marine station in Utah during 1951. He and his 3 buddies would share a keg of beer and watch the atomic bombing light show. 6 years later, he converted to a religion that encouraged healthier lifestyle. Unfortunately, passed away of brain cancer in 1986. What the fuck was that? What the fuck is that? Why'd you put that there? Rest in peace to him. Okay, let's read this one. We still die chasing. Yeah, they didn't put the cheese one. So my dad would have turned 100 this year and told me about this. He said when he was a little boy, his relatives would take him for entertainment to the local state hospital for an afternoon of watching crazy people that had problems with mental health. There was a viewing where people would make fun of these sick people, so I guess that was a hobby. Really sad. Also, you could talk about people going to freak shows at the circus. Indubitably. Well, that was interesting. Let me know which one you thought. Not his comments. Let me know which one you thought that you would want to do. Not in his comments, in my comments. The guy makes a good YouTube page, so give him a little look if you're interested in history and some short form videos. Bye.